Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. In this video, we're going to talk about making the best version of D&D that you can make. And that's right, you can make. Because I think ultimately, creating our own version of D&D at the table is going to suit us the best. And I'm not alone in this. I have here the latest version of D&D, 5th edition, and the very, very first version of D&D, original Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm just going to do a quick reading from each of them to let you know what I mean. This is from OD&D. There are unquestionably areas which have been glossed over. While we deeply regret the necessity, space requires that we put in the essentials only, and trimming will oftentimes have to be added by the referee and their players. In this light, we urge you to refrain from writing for rule interpretations or the like unless you are absolutely at a loss. For everything herein is fantastic, and the best way is to decide how you would like it to be and then make it just that way. On the other hand, we are not loath to answer your questions, but why have us do any more of imagining for you? Write to us and tell us about your additions, ideas, and what you have. We could always do with a bit of improvement on our own refereeing. That's written by the creators of Dungeons & Dragons way back in 1974, I think this came out. Now let's jump forward to the latest edition from 2016, I believe. 2014. This is the latest edition of Dungeons & Dragons. This is from the preface. To play D&D and to play it well, you don't need to read all the rules, memorize every detail of the game, or master the fine art of rolling funny-looking dice. None of those things have any bearing on what's best about the game. Go forth now, read the rules of the game and the story of its world, but always remember that you are the one who brings them to life. They are nothing without the spark of life that you give them. I think if you go back, and actually in the comments below if you want to, through every edition of Dungeons & Dragons, pick the one that you like the best, you will find something very similar in here. The rules are guidelines. The rules will help us build a better adventure. Don't stick to the rules. Don't let DMs know they don't need rules. All this kind of stuff. These are all quotes people pull out all the time. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean that we shouldn't use the rules of the game, that we should just storytell? Not exactly. I think what it means is that we need to look at the game and figure out what we like about it the best and focus on those areas, possibly shifting and changing them, possibly removing other things that take away that part of the game that we like. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do that and how you can too. First of all, let's look at the type of fantasy that you like and you want to emulate. Maybe it's epic fantasy like Lord of the Rings, where there's an ultimate quest and magic is powerful and there's forces of evil and good and ultimately you got to save the world, right? Or maybe it's down and dirty sword and sorcery like Conan, where everything that your player characters are doing is somewhat self-serving, but there's a little bit of a moral compass there. Or maybe not. Or maybe you like something that's very high magic, where everybody's a wizard and like Harry Potter. And there's, again, you could still have this quest against evil, but the idea here is that it's a much more high magic world. It's very super high fantasy. People are changing into monsters left and right, teleporting everywhere. That can be super fun. Figure out what it is that you like in fantasy. D&D can make that for you. While the rules do bake in some kind of a setting, and I've talked about before that D&D has become its own genre, the reality is that the framework of the rules do allow you to do a lot of different things with some hacking. So let's look at it in the idea that 5th edition puts forward with the pillars of play. The combat pillar, the exploration pillar, the social interaction pillar, I think is what they call them. What parts of the game do you like? Do you love tactical combat? Do you more enjoy playing in character, whether doing voices or just speaking as the character and being in those environments, interacting with strange and interesting people in various worlds that you travel to? Or do you like exploring dark, deep dungeons where there's fear around every corner and maybe you don't see another living soul for the entire session, but there's this creeping darkness that's all around you? Or something in the middle? What do we like the most? I find that most people lean towards something more than others. And of course, everybody at your table is going to have their own preference as far as what their focus is. I guess this is really for the dungeon masters, but what you got to really think about is what you love. Because if you don't like tactical combat, but all your players do, you will probably not be able to create awesome tactical combat adventures over and over for them because it's not your jam. Run the stuff you love. If you have enthusiasm and you run it in a way that you believe is amazing, then the players will like it. They will. And if they don't, then you'll find players that do. And somebody else, one of those players that loves tactical combat, can run the tactical adventures. You don't always have to be the DM. The best groups I've ever been in, everybody, or mostly everybody, runs games sometimes. Okay, so once we know what we like and what we kind of want to emulate, the very first thing I would do here is forget everything that you know about D&D. What I find when people are creating their own systems or their own house rules and stuff, they always feel like there's certain things that need to be there, whether it be ability scores or alignment or armor class or hit points or whatever. And they're thinking to themselves, well, these are the basic things that have to be in the game. So I'm just going to hack away at those to make them closer to what I want them to be. Spell levels. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Classes. What is it that you would create if you were starting from the ground up? Think back to what you love. I love tactical combat. I love epic fantasy. So maybe I want to involve large scale battles with lots of opponents against heroic characters. Maybe I'd not worry too much about magic. Maybe that's going to be more of an abstract or something that only the very few characters use or none of the actual players get to use. So it's more of a DM thing. You might even want to remove the word DM and go back to the original term of referee, right? Think about what you really like and what mechanics of the game support those things. If those things don't exist in your game, let's say I've seen a lot of people complain about the 5th edition not having a lot of rules for exploration, and then other people say there is. Okay. I mean, you can debate that as much as you want, but let's just say that you feel that way. You don't love or you don't think that some of the rules in there are what you like. You can then start cribbing from other systems, because what you're going to do is make a list of what you love. Then we're going to go back to the system and we're going to say, what is it in the system that we love? So I love tactical combat. So what do I want to use from 5th edition? I want to use, let's say that's our baseline. I'm going to use flanking. I'm going to use the mass combat rules where with the minions or whatever they call them, where there's if there's 20 kobolds attacking, you just roll 1 and add bonuses. It's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can use those things, and I have actually, quite effectively, and create more of a skirmishy tactical game using minis or not, and those rules from the game. Then you might think, well, you know what? I don't really care too much about, let's say, the exploration, so I'm not going to worry about that. I have rules for that at all because it's not really going to be part of my game, or I'm just going to hand wave it. You explore the dungeon. It's fine. You always find the secret doors. You always find the traps. It's not something I care about in my game. It's more flavor. If the party gets trapped, it's because some kind of tactical mistake they made, not because of a failed perception check, right? On the other hand, maybe you really love the social aspect, the role play, as some people will call it. Maybe you want to just be emissaries that go out and convince the elves to join the battle. And then the main combats, all the tactical stuff happens with just a handful of rolls, more or less off screen, right? It matters more if you can convince these elven armies to join, then you're going to have more points when it comes to that roll off to see who wins the battle against the trolls or whatever they're fighting. So, and then you really want to lean into those rules. And again, and if we're talking about 5th edition, there's lots of things in the Dungeon Master's Guide about changing people's positions. No, you can't just roll a natural 20 when somebody hates you and now they love you. It doesn't work like that. There's rules for that. Or if you're playing a game that doesn't have those things, maybe you want to add them. So like in original Dungeons and Dragons, you've got reaction rolls and you have charisma that modifies that. So it's similar, so it exists and you can use and lean into those rules. See what exists in the system that you really like, that focuses on the pillars that you want to enjoy at your table. For instance, you might love tactical combat in D&D, but you don't love the idea of armor class. You want it to be that dexterity or whatever helps people hit and armor absorbs damage versus whatever. So basically, if you're in plate mail, you're probably easier to hit because you're probably slower. Somebody's going to comment but with a link to some video of somebody doing cartwheels in plate mail. But yeah, you're going to be slower in plate mail than not, right? So you're more likely to get hit, but it's going to absorb damage. So, which, it may be more realistic as to how armor works. I don't know. I don't wear armor. So, maybe you like that. So you can add that, crib that from other systems, start to put this together into your own game. And what you'll find is you'll have this list of effectively, you might create an entire new system that doesn't use 300 pages of rules, but is instead 10 pages of just the stuff you like. And it might be a completely different game. Maybe you've just created a skirmish war game or a social interaction story type game, and you've moved completely away from D&D. And maybe you look at what you did there and you think, well, you know what? This is really not really going to work, but it was a fun experiment and I've learned something. I see what I like, and this is going to help me build my adventures and play the game as it's written. Or maybe you'll make some house rules to make these small changes. Or maybe you'll really like what you made and your group will be willing to play test it and you'll be on your way to creating your own game, which many of us have done. And it can be incredibly rewarding to have people sit down at the table and play the game your way. Not, well, this is D&D, but with some hacks, but this is my game. This is my game of emissaries that are trying to win over these various generals and kings to join our army so we can destroy the dragons. Or this is my game where it's all about small skirmish warfare or large skirmish warfare. And this is my version of the game that I love. And in the end, you either are going to have something you want to play or not. But what you will become from that is a better player, a better game master, because you will have kind of, in a fun way, analyzed what you like. You may see on this channel, I have several videos where I have new combat systems or spell systems and stuff like that. And I do that because I'm trying to figure out what I like about the game. Do I end up using all of these things all the time? No, most of them in the end, I play a few times and I'm like, that's cool, but I got it out of my system, right? And I go back to things that are more traditional that I like. But at the same time, it makes me rethink how those traditional things work and maybe adjust to make small house rules. I would love to know what you have done. Has anybody out there made their own little system? Is it available somewhere? Let me know. I would love to check it out. If not, let me know some house rules. Let me know what categories of games you like. Do you play different games and combine them with D&D? Which is the topic of another video, so I'll stop right there and say, if you haven't already, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you get notifications, and I'll see you next time.